Switching tracks to other news now, and is the global economy staring at a recession? If Morgan Stanley is to be believed, then most economies are showing signs of acute weakness. The escalation of trade tensions between the US and China is also one of the chief factors nudging the world economies into possible recession. The bond yield is showing similar signs as they did during the 2008 economic crisis. In fact, the warning signs are everywhere. OPEC has already cut the oil demand forecast for the 2019 and 20 quarter. The IMF has downgraded the growth outlook for the global economy. Central banks like the Federal Reserve in the US and the Reserve Bank of India have cut rates to stoke activity in the economy during recession. In the last few months, most central banks have indulged in such stimulus measures. China has reported the weakest growth in industrial output since 2002. Germany's exports have sunk. The economy is crumbling. Production in the whole euro has now been on a 3-year low. And the less said about the UK is the better. The imminent fears of recession are the highest for the UK, staring at an uncertain future with Brexit. And so what does all of this mean for India specifically? Well, India is not close to recession yet, but it is seeing a substantial slowdown in sectors like automobile, manufacturing, the real estate. The job market too has slowed down. There is the problem of shadow banking sector. Rural economy remains unpromising as well. The manufacturing market has also contracted, but sectors like food, textile, steel have bucked the trend. Real estate sector is also seeing a slump. In all of this, of course, what's important to note is that Trump and President Xi have to find a way to restore the global economic order. Attacks on globalization will only lead to more and more supply-side shocks, and exports will be hurt. But Trump and President Xi seem to care more about the outcome of their trade war rather than the health of the global economy. And Holly Hudson is now joining us live for the latest on this from London. And Holly, so it looks like we could potentially be looking at a global recession, and the UK doesn't look very good either, the European Union. And all of this, of course, keeping in mind that the Chinese and the Americans need to really get started on, the trade negotiations, because it's really pulling down the global economy.
Certainly, yes. Well, we're seeing an ever-increasingly gloomy outlook from economists, particularly here in the UK, with regards to a recession and around the world. And there's been some very stark warning signs, not least the phenomenon known as the inverted yield curve. Now, without going into the jargon and the detail with that, that is seen as perhaps the biggest red light with regards to a recession. It's predicted or preceded recessions around the world over the last 50 years, and seen as the biggest sort of reliable indicator of at least an economic downturn, and that happened in the US and the UK last week. Now, we should say that it has now reverted, but it led to a huge slump in the markets and, of course, spooked investors as well. So why are they so spooked? Well, it's a real combination of factors at the moment. A number of things at play, triggers around the world, as you mentioned there. A number of economies, a number of world economies suffering from issues. In particular, Germany, the world's fourth largest economy, saw its biggest dip in GDP in the last decade. And here in the UK, while on the surface, the IMF predicted the economy is likely to grow, employment is at its highest. Under the surface, there are issues. The UK saw its biggest shrink in the last 7 years in its economy, pushing the pound down further. As you may remember, last month, the sterling fell to even at least parity with the dollar, and there's fears that could well happen again. Now, the new Chancellor, I should say, Sajid Javid, pointed to the challenging global situation, as he put it, for causing that shrink in the UK's economy. But there's absolutely no doubt that Brexit is playing a part. Fears over no deal, of course, still spooking investors and businesses who are sort of holding back from doing anything here as well. Now, some do say that this is an overreaction. Donald Trump, of course, does believe that himself. He said that it's actually the fake news media that are to blame for stoking these fears of a recession to hinder his chances at re-election in 2020.